There's a lag, Nitin, and
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to VSAR. I'm Pallavi, Principal Associate, your host for today's session. Here we are with our fourth episode of Imaginal Talk series. It gives me immense pleasure to facilitate the VSR Imaginal Talk series on learning and skills development. And to initiate the conversation, we have wonderful delegates with us. Dr. Mona Shah, our founder and director, also author of the amazing book Millennials Poised to Lead, which is a best-selling book on Amazon. And now our guest. We have dynamic personality on our show today, Mr. Feisal Gwaderi, Managing Director at Delaware Consulting Limited, London, UK. I'm sure this evening will not only be interesting but also packed with lot of takeaways. So without further ado, let's proceed to listen to the interesting conversation. Over to you, ma'am.
thank you. Thank you, Pallavi, and a hearty welcome to all those who have joined our fourth live episode of this year. We have gone international with this one, and that's really special to all of us in the fast growing Bayati Systems community. Welcome to Mr. Feisal Gwaderi also. Let me introduce you to the idea behind the series. It is actually to offer very personal perspectives about the role learning has played in the lives of our guests. As an academic, I see firsthand the whole idea of learning is undergoing a radical change. There is so much that is thought, spoken, written, experienced, questioned, and planned in policies that it has left the whole world in a conundrum about its relevance or utility. This talk series is dedicated to deconstructing and understanding this very change. Many ask me about why we've named the talk Imaginal and what is Imaginal. Imaginal is the last stage after which the caterpillar transforms into a butterfly. We also know it as the pupa stage. The entire metamorphosis of the butterfly is an almost magical process rarely found elsewhere in the world of living species. For one, the different forms in the metamorphosis are distinct from one another, so distinct that while in a particular stage, it would be difficult to imagine how the next form would appear for those who see it from the outside. And do you know, this stage wise development is completely lost on the butterfly too. It does not remember how it looked when it was a caterpillar, and neither does the caterpillar know how it would look in future when it becomes a butterfly. Miraculous, isn't it? In all my 3 decades and more as a professor and a strong proponent of all things educational, I frequently came across the lines being repeated from learners. We never really learn anything while in school. It's only when we experience the hard knock of reality that we really learn. Much like the caterpillar, which has no clue what it will become in the future, most of us go through learning not knowing how exactly it had been designed to help us grow into useful and beautiful individuals in society. Interestingly, though, this view on learning held by multitudes has always been in contradiction to another reality. The reality being that the desire to enroll in good colleges and acquire degrees is equally appealing in some cultures. The parents are ready to sacrifice their present for the future of their wards. As an example, well educated Fortune 50 company Indian CEOs like Satya Nadella and Sundar Pichai were born into a modest family, yet were supported by their parents to invest in their ambitions. On the other hand, there are billionaires, Oprah Winfrey, with practically no education beyond high school, born to a teenaged mother, growing up without electricity or water. And of course, we know about Mark Zuckerberg, who dropped out of Harvard to launch Facebook. At another level, we all are aware that there is no better comparative advantage than that of a highly skilled human resource for any country to do well at the global scale. Why educate oneself if it lacks clarity, or is either forgotten, or is seen as an irrelevant, at a later date? Why does formal education continue to command more premium? Can continuous competency and skilling be the way forward instead of only relying on academic degrees? So, today I shall ask my guest and viewers why these contradictions. We present to you a number of guests from diverse backgrounds who will express their ideas on learning with anecdotes from their personal journeys. They will share how learning helped, or for that matter, did not help in their own growth and development. We also urge you to post your reactions and comments and engage with our guests for this evening. Mr. Feisal Gwaderi, Managing Director, Delaware Consulting Limited. Mr. Gwaderi is our first international guest on Imaginal Talk series on learning and development, and we are honored to have him with us. Thank you, Faisal, for joining us today and agreeing to share your own experiences on this show.
And thank you for inviting me to take part in this series. When you look around the world, change is happening at a faster pace today than at any time in history. And how we equip ourselves to deal with this, and the attitude and the approach that we do that with, is an extremely important subject in whichever country one is in. So thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's indeed a pleasure to introduce Faisal to you. Faisal has an outstanding track record in academics with a degree in economics from the prestigious University of Bristol, followed by the London Business School in 2006. As late as 2019, he underwent a program, Strategy in the Age of Digital Disruption, at INSEAD, earning a distinction grade there too. His core interest and focus are finance and information technology. Strategy is Feisal Gwaderi's middle name. He is a leader in strategy and business transformation, executing through mergers and acquisitions, and managing significant change programs of companies. Feisal has experience of management buyouts and alternative investment market listed and FTSE 250 companies, including their UK and international portfolio businesses. He has led board-level decisions on strategy, growth, competitiveness, and digital technology. Feisal is recognized as a strategic thinker who gets things done. His corporate career spans close to 2 decades, covering infrastructure and real estate domains, with leading UK-based companies as the Kier Group and May and Gurney PLC. Since he began independent consulting in 2019, he has worked with large corporate houses and private equity, advising on acquisitions, strategic change, and investor engagement. He is also a board advisor to AI-powered construction logistics startup, CoLogic. In short, Feisal could be described as a significant mastermind behind many a corporate success. So let me begin with my first question. I would like to ask you, Feisal, could you describe a key learning from your childhood school days that has stayed with you? And another question to that is, this one could be from an informal situation with elders, teachers, or relatives who have perhaps instilled something unique within you. So whether the formal or the informal, could you recount to our viewers any kind of learning that has remained with you throughout your career up until now?
Sure. If I reflect on my on those childhood days as growing up, one of the things that characterized that period was that my parents moved countries a couple of times, particularly between the UK and Kenya, where I was born, but also briefly in the Middle East. And one of the things which I found, I remember when I was about 10 years old, I found this extremely difficult. And that's because there is a diversity of people and attitudes in different places. People come from different backgrounds and cultures and so on. And, when you're very young, you haven't really encountered that. You're just used to people immediately around you. But it is one of the things which I did learn. And as I learned not only to recognize that diversity in people and thinking cultures, but to appreciate it, suddenly all sorts of possibilities started opening up in friendships and opportunities. And that sense of the importance of diversity and how it enriches us has stayed with me all the way through. And it is, I'd say, as relevant today, perhaps more relevant today than it has ever been. In terms of that sort of informal situation you described with elders, the person who probably had one of the biggest influences on me was my grandfather, Bapa. And he left school when he was 13 because his parents couldn't afford to keep him in school. And he went on to build a successful business career, built large companies, and even wrote a book. And one of the things that even in his later years, that stayed with me, he'd be over 100 today if he were alive still, is that he was constantly watching and learning, and he was constantly curious, and he wanted to try everything. And that is something which is what propelled him forward. I mean, he did put himself through some formal training early in his career, but a lot of it was watching and learning and getting things wrong, and then working out how to get it right. And I think that and learning from other people is a lesson that he has passed on to me, among a number of other lessons that he has passed on to me. There's one that I think is relevant to our conversation today.
That's really interesting. I mean, you have covered a few geographies, and what you learned from those places, you have imbibed in yourself, and you're a continuous learner for life, as they say. That's interesting. So throughout, my next question is, of course, around our things like formal education, and we go through our formal education and the higher education prescribed curriculum, which you may have taken in economics, finance, and math, as your CV suggests. Can you say that you have been able to correlate most of what you learned there with what you have been doing in your professional life?
This is actually a trickier question than it might sound, because the first thing I think is important to understand is that there are a couple of parts to formal education, and particularly the sort of school and university education, so immediately post-school education. One part of that is the content, the technical content of what you're learning. But the other is actually training your mind and how you think to think critically and to be able to explore subjects and get new perspectives. And the two obviously coincide, and the first part of that becomes extremely important if you do something like medicine, where everybody wants you to know the subject very well, and it becomes irrelevant to your future career. But for most degrees, and I would include the degree that I did in economics, it is probably less vocational than some of those others. And I think that's an important distinction, but it is nevertheless important. And, as an aside, I'm a very good friend of mine, has 2 degrees in philosophy, and has, over the last 10 years, built a business and just sold it for a great deal of money. So, I think it's important that people understand that this is not just about how you do your job. That said, I think if I look at what I have done, what I did do at that time, Yes, there is. I mean, in what I do, I've done in strategy, and I've looked at the development of businesses, the understanding of economics. Excuse me, sorry, of economics, of finance, of those dynamics is relevant. The understanding that I got there helps me today. You know, and even in, you know, if I think back to my school days when I did, you know, maths to a high level, you know, in essence, and particularly when you get to that level, it is about patterns and relationships. That is essentially what the mathematics describes. And when you're looking at business situations, and you're looking at markets, and you're looking at organizations, an ability to look at patterns and relationships is extremely important. And actually allows you to develop insights that you can't simply by looking at things mechanically. So a longer answer than perhaps I should have gone, but you know, I hope it gives you some idea of how I view these things.
Right. Incidentally, even I have a background in economics. I'm a graduate in economics, and I followed it up with a professional degree. And there was always this this kind of a tension between the thinking sciences and the doing sciences. You know, so I kind of understand where we come from, because economics is a very thinking subject, and it's not vocational, as you rightly said. My next question is, did you add specific skills in your professional career? And the corollary to that is, did you acquire the new skills through training, or you simply acquired them organically?
Well, the short answer is both. Let me break that down a bit. I mean, there are some formal skills, technical skills, that one just has to learn. You know, so if you're looking at finance, you're looking at M&A, you're looking at these sort of things, you have to learn how to value a company. You have to learn about cash flows and balance sheets and so on and so forth. And these things which you just have to learn, ideally formally, which I did, and then through encounters. I then, you know, on the formal side of those sort of skills, there is also then putting myself through additional training, if there are particular areas of finance or particular areas of strategy, which I think are relevant, and that doing that course would accelerate my understanding in a way that I didn't want to just wait for it to happen organically. So an example of that is I did a course at INSEAD that you referred to earlier. And the reason for that is, you know, that was particularly about the strategy around digital disruption, because I have a particular interest in old-fashioned businesses who are encountering a digital world, like construction, property, and real estate, which is in my background. And you know, that area technically is moving very quickly, and actually, if you wait to learn on the job, you either won't learn because you're dealing with things that people have never done before, or it'll take far too long. So this was helpful, and it gave me some excellent insights. And then, you know, there are skills which don't look like hard skills, but are really important in an organization, like coaching and mentoring and leadership and so on, which, you know, are in many ways underrated, but are so important. Because if you can draw the best out of your teams, if you can draw the best out of the people around you, then you will do better individually. The company will do better overall. Was it Mark McCormick, you know, well, they don't teach you at Harvard Business School, who said, yes, you know, if we constantly employ people who are better than us, we will than ourselves, we will end up as a company of giants. If we keep employing people who are not as good as us, we will end up as a company of pygmies. And actually, the bit that I would add to that is the coaching and mentoring and the leadership is what allows the people who are better, who hopefully you will bring in, to flourish in your business. So those are the sort of broadly areas that which I was given or I sought out formal extra training. But then there are other areas which you learn more organically, and those can be hundreds of different things. Whether that is knowledge that you acquire because you're working with somebody who's enormously experienced in a particular field, and through those encounters you learn about markets and businesses and everything else, how to do things. Or it might be something quite specific, but again, you're learning it on the job, right? Not just how to write a business case that they can teach you at school, but one that actually gets you the result that you want. I think the other area that is and sorry, that by the way, I would not in any way underplay that informal bit. I've been extremely lucky, that throughout my career, I've had people who I've worked for who I have learned a great deal from. I've been able to learn a good deal from. Not everybody gets that. And frankly, I would encourage anybody listening to this who doesn't have that in their job to find somebody else to work for. because
that's a good one.
Because it's more, they say, in nature, everything is either growing or it's dying. There's no middle ground in nature. And for people, you have to grow, you want to develop. But for that to work in practice, you have to be with people, including who your boss is, who your manager is, who will enable that and encourage that. So that, and the last one I think which I sort of learned as I've gone and in other ways, but is important, is how to build a team that complements my own skills. I had one of the first people I worked for was extremely good at that, and he was very self-aware and he understood what he was good at. He'd done a management buyout of a company. He was very successful, but he understood where he was strong and where he was not strong. And he built his team accordingly. So his team was absolutely solid, and it is that again is something which I would encourage people to look for, formally or informally, in what they do. So
that's really
it's that mix.
Really wonderful. Oh yes, of course it does. And in fact, there is so much that I find, agreeing with you, because recently I wrote a book, as you know, and in the same book I have written and quoted Mark McCormack saying that the millennials don't like being dictated, being an authoritative leader. They just like to explore themselves. They will work only in those environments which give them that freedom, where they like to grow with others. So how very well said. And if I may go on to the next question, unless you, of course,
please do.
Yeah. Could you cite with examples the key skills needed in strategy and transformation at the corporate or board level? Because this is so important. We are seeing so much activity now, and post-COVID, so many companies are floundering in terms of their existence, or in terms of the difficult times that they have gone through. It's really very difficult to understand what's going on in there. So going forward, we really need to know which key competencies will define individual or team success when we are thinking strategy and transformation.
Okay. It's a really interesting question. Let me break it down a little bit, because as you rightly say, we are all over the world. Businesses all over the world are going through a tremendously challenging time at the moment. And to a degree, the skills that one needs in those sort of crisis times and the skills that one might need in steady state, there are differences in that, and the sort of characters that you need to have in key positions. So, but I think there are ones in common. There are areas in common which will be worth tackling on. One is that there is, in my view, a need at the sort of corporate board level for to be able to look long term at where you're trying to get to, but also deal with urgent and immediate issues today. Now, a lot of people, in my experience and observation, can't do both. There are some people who are excellent operators, but who cannot think beyond the next budget cycle. And there are other people who are fantastic strategic thinkers, but can't get anything done. And so your ideal person in a sort of leadership chief executive role should be able to have an element of both in there, so that decisions taken today to solve today's problems are taken in a way that helps and doesn't hinder your ability to achieve your longer term goals. Otherwise, it's very easy to take short term decisions and then your longer term goals go out of the window. So I think there's that. Now, I think recognizing that individuals don't necessarily possess all skills, to my point about building your team that we talked about previously, it might be that on your board or in your team, you need to build that into the mix. But I think it's necessary. The second thing I'd come to is decision making. Particularly if you're talking in a corporate sense, this is less so, I think, in smaller businesses, but in large corporate organizations. Decision making is a very odd thing, in my view, because people say that they are decisive, and a lot of people on boards are not very decisive, is my view. So what you have is boards that meet with a great stack of papers that have been written, giving opinions and data and so on the matters in question. But are the decisions always taken at the time in the right way? Often I've seen not always. And where that hasn't happened, I'm thinking of a particular example where a decision was delayed a few months. It was to do a fundraise, and had they done it at the time that they should have done it, the business would have survived very well. The fact that they delayed because they were worrying about whether it would make them look bad, which is often the case. People are people, meant that actually the company was in a worse situation as a result and needed more remedial measures. So decision making that's based on evidence rather than emotion, and based on clear goals and taken in a timely fashion, absolutely critical. And back to the point of in crisis mode versus normal running, in crisis mode, this becomes double, triply important. You have to be able to take decisions. I think the other thing which, particularly today, and we've talked about the way in which the world's changing constantly at the moment, technologically, in various other pressures that I'm sure we'll come to, and trends. The idea that any person on a board and any leadership position at any level of an organization knows everything that is needed is, to my mind, a nonsense. They don't. They will do their best. And so a piece is not really a skill so much as an attitude, is that you have to be open to challenge. And in fact, I would go as far as to seek out challenge. If there's a hedge fund manager called Ray Dalio, who many of your viewers might know of, who, as a principle of his organization, says that everybody, whether you're the most senior person or the most junior person, not only has a right but an obligation to challenge, and also to seek challenge against what they do. So he says he will look for the best people he can find on the subject he's looking at, on which he has a view, on which he's going to take investment decisions, and he'll get them to challenge it. Now, that is a particular way of thinking which requires a certain level of humility in leadership, but it gives you a strength in your decision making and a confidence in your decision making that you will not have if you simply say, "I know it all." And I think the last
Yes.
point is that, because what you're trying to do is to carry people with you, including through difficult times at the moment in some cases, you need to be able to tell the story, not simply reel off numbers.
Right.
You need to be able to give people a story that will enroll them in what you're collectively trying to achieve and where you're trying to go and why they should follow you. Leaders don't lead simply because they're put into a position with a fancy title. Why should there has to be a reason for people to follow you? Or, as I was recommending earlier, those people will go and work for somebody else.
Very true. Yes. I know there are still so many questions left, and I think we have to leave time for the audience also. So let me just go through these quickly. But this was a marvelous answer, and I think you're absolutely right. Strategy is a big word, and every B school says, okay, if you are in strat, then we are doing something significant. But with strategy comes a lot of responsibility. As you said, a little bit of decisiveness as well as the ability to take people along would go a long way. Now I come to something that you, I, and many perhaps who have joined live would know, that they are independent businesses that they are leading, or they are actually leading independent functions as seniors in their organizations. So the next question comes out of that as an independent consultant, which new skills do you think we need to possess, like as independent consultants, and to be taken seriously by the world? And again, another question to that is related to that is, which particular skills are needed for professionals in mergers and acquisitions or any of the finance related strategy that they are required to do? So if you could just throw a little bit of light on that.
I'll try and run through that. I think as an independent consultant is something which I'm relatively new to. In the last couple of years, I've switched to that. I would say that in my observation, what's needed to work is a track record that gives you that credibility, not just in what you know, but your ability to deliver. You need a level of self-confidence, you need a level of humility, and you probably need a thick skin sometimes. Because you're selling your services as an individual, and people need you or you don't, or they don't. But as long as you have that, you're fine. You need to be able to roll your sleeves up. And also my view is that if you're an independent consultant, it's best not to try and sell just by trying to press for more and more work. If you do a really good job, then that's fine, and you'll get the work if it's there. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. But doing, like in all things, do a good job, maintain your track record, build on that, put it across well, and build a relationship to get on with people in a good way. On the M&A finance question, look, I mean, I think there's the host of technical finance skills, which it's not helpful to run through here, but obviously you need those for the relevant bit of the financing you're doing. I think you also need project management skills, which are usually not talked about in M&A, but there's a lot of project management involved in that. I think if you're the principal doing the acquisitions or the divestments, you need to be really clear about why you're doing the deal, and then stay focused on value versus price. You should be, you don't want to pay full value, the value to you. You don't want to pay that to the other person. You want to get it at a good price, and you be able to take some value from it. And you need to understand that, and you need to be able to walk away. And simply when you're halfway through a deal, it's you can get so emotionally attached. It's quite difficult to walk away. Sometimes you have to be able to walk away. So I think running through very quickly, those are probably some of the key attitudes and skills that I would highlight.
Right. Thank you for that. And I think I can now ask you another question, which is, typically this happens where there are especially women. Basically, they are not given those key or plum positions, saying that they are generally don't have a head for math, or they perhaps don't have a head for money and tech. So it comes out of there that do you think that skills in finance and maths and technology are prerequisites for clinching C-suite roles in companies?
Okay, so look, there are a couple of parts to what you said, and let me deal with both of them. One of those skills, and the other, that context that you gave me about, it's often women who are prevented from going into those roles with this as the excuse. So I think it's always seemed to me a bit of a nonsense that women are often excluded from a great many roles. I mean, even in the UK, within the construction sector that I spent time in, the balance between men and women is pretty poor. The balance is 75% to 25%, and so on. But there are some excellent engineers who are women.
Yes.
And essentially, it's an attitude which is remarkably old-fashioned. It is incredibly inefficient. It excludes half your potential workforce. And a lot of the excuses are because those attitudes have been baked into the policies of companies, which means that, which is probably a separate discussion we could have, but essentially means that it makes it more difficult for women. The idea that women are not good at maths and finance and engineering, and that men automatically are by virtue of their gender, is illogical. There are fantastic men and women who are fantastic at all of that, and there are men and women who are totally hopeless at both of that, and there is the full spectrum in between. So it's a case of finding who are the best people to do what you need and to find those roles. On the other side of your question, which is about the C-suite, look, I mean, if you're going to be in business, you need a certain amount of understanding of the how money works and how business works, and the sort of commercial skills, and that involves maths and so on. But most of it is not high finance. Most of it is arithmetic.
Right.
But put very simply, if your income is greater than your costs, you're making a profit. And if your costs are greater than your income, you're making a loss. I mean, there is no high finance involved. It is, as I say, purely arithmetic. But it is. But if you are, depending on the company, depending on the business, and it's not necessary, I think, to have degrees in finance just on a board. It is necessary to have a certain commerciality to your thinking.
Okay.
And to understand that, and that is different to being able to run a spreadsheet. I think
that's right.
And so I think that's what I would say on that question.
Okay. Thank you. I have two short questions and then one rather, a question which requires a little deeper thought on for us from at your end, and for us to be able to understand where the future is. So I'll take those two small short questions quickly, which is, of course, around the millennials and Generation Z. The question is, which key attitudes and skills would millennials and Generation Z need going forward, and why, in your opinion?
This again is a really interesting question that, in terms of hard technical skills, is virtually impossible to answer. Because if you look back over the last 15, 20 years, there are jobs and the companies that exist today that not only didn't exist, but couldn't have existed. And there are roles within that which couldn't have existed all that time ago. So I think saying I have to, you need to learn this technical skill and that will get you a job in future is the wrong way to look at it. I think the right way to look at it is that you have to develop certain attributes which will mean that you are able to deal with that change. And I think specifically, there is an agility to your thinking that you need to adopt, so that things don't stay the same and you're okay with that. You needs to be a hunger to learn. A bit like I was talking earlier about my grandfather. You have to have that curiosity, that hunger to learn about things that you don't know much about. And in fact, that there are people who, particularly if you're in a more senior role, there are people who are more junior than you that will know more about it than you do.
Right.
Talking a while ago to various people who are in some very, very large companies, international companies, and and who've been in the British Army and so on. And you take the British Army. I mean, there are occasions where they are bringing in people in their 20s, 30s, people who are sort of junior officers, lieutenants, whatever, and they're sitting at the top table talking about digital and technical skills to these old generals, and these old generals are finding it very difficult to take instruction from this private or this lieutenant, because that's not supposed to be how it works. But I'm afraid that is how it works. And whoever you are, you have to have that hunger to learn. You will then go out, as I did, as other people do, and find the technical skills as you go that you realize that you need. Or you'll find the learning, or you'll find the people to teach you, the courses, whatever it is. But you have to have the mindset that allows that. I think the other thing which is extremely important is critical thinking. And, we talked about that much earlier on. I think particularly with the amount of information that comes at us these days, through digital channels especially, being able to think critically about what you're hearing and also detaching yourself from the noise and taking your decisions based on facts is a skill in and of itself. And it will, and it's this sort of combination, I think, will allow the millennials, Generation Z, and so on, but everybody, frankly, to have a certain resilience to be able to prosper, however things change, and not just tie yourself to one area of development. Because anybody who tells you they know what's going to look like in 20 years' time it doesn't know what they're talking about.
That's right. So true. With that, I have another question, of course, and that is the brave new world that is going to open up, has opened up actually because of the explosion of everything tech. So whether it is IoT, whether it is IT-enabled services, everything, and now digital, of course, everything has just changed. So driven by the explosive internet advantage, we see that younger millennials and Gen Z have entered the era of what we call creative individual entrepreneurship. Where you actually said at the beginning of the talk that people should go and work for someone else, but the reverse seems to be happening. People want to just now work for themselves, and they have the internet, and they feel that they can, this has empowered them into entrepreneurship. So going by that, what competencies can lead them to succeed in crowded and competitive space, which is the rule of the digital world? what do you think can make them succeed? Because each one is out there on the rooftop and selling his wares, and down below on the streets, nobody is willing to buy or find it difficult to even make sense of all that cacophony. So, what is it that would distinguish individuals who are using the net to actually sell what they have? Some thoughts on that, please?
Sure. I think the place to start is that the distinction between the digital world and the real world, as it were, it is blurring, and some would argue has already blurred. If I look at my little boy who's 1.5, he talks to his grandparents. When he sees them in person, he plays with them, and he sees them on FaceTime. And clearly there is a difference, but he's equally comfortable. He's not even 1.5. And I think that is a sign that actually this is simply a case of, in the first instance, of the mode, the mechanism is changing. The technology allows you to reach customers and audiences, like in this program, which you would not be able to reach by just getting people into a room. It gives you tremendous reach. It allows you to do things that in the past you would not be able to do technically, and you give people insights and services that couldn't have existed before. But fundamentally, you're still dealing with providing a service or a product to customers who have needs or interests or just want. And you have to be able to agree a price, and you have to be able to provide the service, and all the things which actually happen offline. And so I think the fundamentals of business don't change. I think what does change is the need to think about how, what service can you provide? But also, and I think of this in the context of, I'm on an advisory board of a startup. As you said, I'm talking to other startups and so on. I've received, when I was in a large company, people coming to pitch to me on things. In a B2B context versus a B2C context, I think there is an additional complication. And that is that there are decision makers who are in those companies who are not as tech savvy as the people selling the products to those individual entrepreneurs. And so a skill that those individual entrepreneurs need to develop, and I encourage them to do so, is to put themselves in the other person's shoes. They are your customers after all. And you have to be able to explain your fantastically whizzy tech offering in terms that old guy who doesn't get it gets it.
That's right. They need patience.
Yeah, but it also means putting it in terms that they understand, which is remembering, basic rule of selling. People don't buy features, they buy the benefits. So if you're going to take your idea, your product, your service that you've developed online, and you want a business to buy it, then show them what difference it's going to make to their business. Is it going to mean that they will reduce their costs, or that their customers will pay more for what they do, or they can increase their price, or how is it going to create value for them? Does it make their life easier?
Right.
And release their time. These are the sort of things that you would talk about offline. But what I found in my experience is that often it's very easy when you're talking about the digital offering, the technology offering, to get so caught up in the technology that you forget that this is for somebody.
Yes.
And it actually, like any product or service, it only creates value in that context. So I think that's where I would encourage the people who are setting up as in the individual entrepreneurs to focus their thinking. Is because they will have the technical skills. That's why they're doing what they're doing. But think about your customer, think about your audience, and do a fantastic job for them.
That's right. Yes.
And they'll want more.
I think we have to leave some time for our participants and who have joined in live. So I think Pallavi, if you can just tell us whether we can I can summarize a few of these skills that Faisal has shared with us, and then we can take the audience questions if there are any right now. So would you allow me to do that, Pallavi?
Yes, ma'am, please go ahead.
Yes. So I think I was able to capture a few of the skills that you have said are very important, Faisal, and I have to thank you for your candid responses. From this talk, I can summarize that some skills that have enabled you as at the personal and professional level have been first and foremost, of course, the curiosity that you learned from your grandfather, and the kind of attitudes that you developed because of the places you changed so often in your childhood, so from Canada and UK and Kenya and so on. And of course that diversity helped you help form your early personality. Of course there are other harder skills that we kind of moved on to, and you said that learning through your economics background helped you to get patterns in everything. And I so much agree with you, because when we see a problem, we are immediately able to think beyond and understand with very little data what a particular data point on hand may be very slim, but we're able to integrate other data points that we have stored in our mind. I absolutely understand what it's about, seeing the patterns and relationships that our learning has enabled us. And of course, in the key strategy competencies, which you say that in crisis, those are different skills that we kind of learn. Those are the ability to, like in the pandemic we are experiencing, ability to have vision as well as the gumption to handle our short-term crisis. So the team has all these specialists, and we should not to go it alone, but try to use the team wisdom to try and navigate through the short-term towards the long-term. And of course, decisiveness is what you like and have recommended. And I do believe that India had a very decisive leadership during the crisis, and we've been able to avert disaster. Our numbers are so huge that no country can compare when we compare ourselves getting out of this crisis. So I think it was that decisive leadership that really stemmed a very extreme kind of a situation from happening. And of course, humility and a strong story for all leaders, so that people will be inspired to follow them and not just follow them out of compulsion. So I think these are some very important ones to take that are takeaways, like credibility, self-confidence, thick skins if we have to have if we have to be entrepreneurs. Yes, I agree. And of course, the ability to be the all-in-one, roll your sleeves up and do the stuff yourself kind of thing. So I like the idea that you, because we also in Vayati teach a lot of project management. You said that in any kind of an M&A situation, not just reading the balance sheet is important, but that is the technical part of it, but also project management skills. And how true, because on the one side, we are merging assets, which are physical assets, but on the other side is the human merger or acquisition. That can be a nightmare. So I absolutely understand what you mean by that. And of course, to understand the difference between value and price when it comes to anything which is a key skill in finance, as you say, that we need to have. Um, as far as the new generations are concerned, the millennials and the Generation Z, I think what you have recommended is that hard technical skills are not just the only way. There are new roles that are happening. And so the attributes of agility, the hunger to learn, to think critically are most important. And of course, everything is fine. There's nothing to worry for any or one of us, because the digital and the real, as you say, are blurring. The boundaries are blurring, and both are just into one another. So we just go and take it in our stride and just kind of live with it very happily. And that's what you have recommended. And I think that will help us also in our going forward, because you have actually been able to put the perspective in place. So without further I think Pallavi should take over. And thank you so much from my side, Faisal, for being here with us today.
No, thank you for inviting me. Very enjoyed it.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. It was a very interesting and informative talk. We have a lot of questions and the comment from our audience. As time is a constraint, I'll just pick a few.
Mm-hmm.
So I can show the questions on screen, and also help. I'll just read out the question also.
Thank you.
So this is from Mr. Ruturaj. He's asking which functional strategies can be adopted by a real estate contractor to achieve his sustainability goal, especially post-pandemic, when the budget and margins are very low.
Okay, that's an interesting question. I think the answer depends a little bit on context. So let's, for a moment, just understand what we mean by sustainability. That's a very big subject, and we could have a whole session just on it. But in broad terms, an easy way to think about it is people, planet, and profit. And it's all of those three things, considering all of those three things. Investors are increasingly talking about ESG as environment, social, and governance combination as a criteria for assets, businesses that they are willing to invest in, that they have to meet certain standards on these things. And so it is very much a current issue. I agree with that. I think, what can you do as a contractor in real estate? It's very interesting. So I think again, let's break it down a little bit, but still broadly, if you look at what you've got in a building, and I'm assuming you're talking about here the maintenance of buildings, so this will also be the construction of buildings. You have the material that the building is made of, you have the design of the building, and you have how you maintain all the various elements of it. And I'm generalizing here, I appreciate that for benefit of time. When you're looking at the design, if you're putting up a new building, that sustainability can be designed in, so you make it more efficient, for example, in energy use, which then goes on to reduce your energy, which is more sustainable, and reduce your costs, which helps your budget. If you're dealing with an existing building, you have an issue around retrofit in terms of that. But there are products available now which won't solve everything, but you can rely, for example, on ceiling windows, You can also look at what we know as the M&E, the mechanical engineering elements, electrical elements of it, like lifts and air conditioning units and so on, and are those efficient? But what then you can do, and I've seen this done on new and old buildings, is that you can use technology now to integrate those with a building management system. That building management system gives you the data on the use of the building. It gives you the ability to see not only when something's going to break down, so you can have planned works which can reduce your costs rather than just reactive, but it allows you to see whether you should change the configuration of the use of the building to make it more efficient. Do you have open plan, or do you have offices? Do you have too many people on this floor or not enough on this floor to justify it being there? And so it allows you, gives you the data, and it gives you the insight to take decisions. The other part, and when we talk about FM again, it's not just buildings. It can be, I'm thinking of a business that I know in the UK, which does maintenance on restaurants and shops. And particularly on the restaurants, where you don't see it when you think about it, you go in and you're sitting at the table and you've ordered it. There's a kitchen behind. And that has, if you've got fast food restaurants particularly, you've got fryers and you've got fridges and you've got all sorts of stuff in there. And they're developing an IoT solution, Internet of Things solution, which allows you to, again, to monitor all of those things. They're just widgets that go on. It feeds back the data that allows you to plan, that allows you to make sure that you don't have any drop in service because you can plan the works. It's a relatively low cost thing to do, but it allows you to have quite a large impact in terms of your efficiency. And remember, efficiency in cost reduction and efficiency in environmental terms often go together because you're using less resources, and less resources cost less money. So look, we could go on for another hour on that subject, but I hope that gives you a flavor of there are possibilities, through the design, through the maintenance, using technology intelligently and just looking at things from a slightly different perspective.
That's great. So you have given us a direction to think how to manage in this difficult time, especially in real estate sector.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now we have another question from Mr. Rajiv Gupta.
Mm-hmm.
He's asking, can you share your merger and acquisition experience about time taken from initial talks to final closure and success rate from negotiation to closure?
Well, the short answer is that it's been getting longer in recent years. And at the moment, it's well, I would say it's all the deals are taking longer, but a lot of them are. And the reason for that is caution around risk. At the moment, for reasons that we know and we touched on, this is a difficult environment for businesses. So there is a caution amongst buyers to make sure that they are, in simple terms, not overpaying for the assets that they're buying. So they are stress testing the assumptions of the businesses, they're stress testing the cash flows and so on. That due diligence process is taking longer than would otherwise be the case, which can be frustrating, but you can sort of understand where it is. And frankly, a lot of businesses more generally have, in the last year, have taken decisions more slowly because there's so much uncertainty around. So I think, if put timescales on it, whereas, if you went back a few years, you might do something within a very few months. You can easily be talking. I mean, there's a deal which I was involved with recently where, what with uncertainty and COVID and everything else, took over a year and a half to get across the line from initial discussions to completion, which is painful, frankly.
It's quite a long time.
But hopefully when things settle down, whenever that is, this will also settle down. but it's taking longer at the moment, and you just have to be
patient enough. Okay, that's great. So with this, we come to an end of this episode. On behalf of VSAR System, I thank Mr. Feisal for joining us and our viewers for engaging with us through comments and questions. This is a discourse that requires all of us to be involved and engaged in. It has the power to shape ourselves and all those around us and our future. Signing out, looking forward to yet another distinguished guest. Please follow the Imaginal Talk on YouTube, Imaginal blog on VSAR Systems website. Bye for now. Stay with Imaginal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Faisal. Thank you, Pallavi. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.